have all of those conversations with your community and make sure that they are aware. It's not a secret. What we're doing is not a secret. There might be some tactical things in there that you don't want to share with your community. That's cool. You don't need to tell them everything, but they certainly need to know that you have a plan.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Safety Gap Podcast. I'm your co-host, Cassidy. I'm here today with Karen. Karen, how are you doing?
I am good. What is today? Today's Thursday. I was almost going to say Friday. I'm good.
Today's Thursday. Karen's at home. It's a rarity on a Thursday, so I'm sure that feels good.
It does. Just got home last night. Lovely summer travel. So for all of you who travel a lot, you know that summer travel is really fun, especially when you're flying into Denver between like 2 p.m., 6 p.m., and even sometimes a little bit later because of our afternoon storm. So I've been delayed, Cassidy, 5 out of my last 6 flights.
I thought you were going to talk about how bumpy it is, because it's always really bumpy too. When you do get into Denver, it's always a bumpy flight. So
bumpy. I think I'm used to that. It's the delay that I'm like, oh.
You can always tell who lives here because they're just super casual in their seats when we're flying in, and the people who don't are white knuckled, because I'm like, no, this is what it's like flying into Denver.
So I will say, flying out of Denver, you kind of start recognizing people. So there was someone on my flight, one of our state representatives on my flight, headed to the East Coast earlier in the week. And so that was kind of fun to watch people, going up and chatting him up a little bit, and it's a good time.
Well, we should introduce our guest, Pat Hamilton, the Alliance Director at the I Love You Guys Foundation. Pat, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful having you. We always like to start by giving you the floor. Tell us a little bit about what the foundation is and how it got started and the origin story. That'd be wonderful.
So the foundation was started back in 2006 by John Michael and Ellen Keyes. And it was started just a few days after they lost their daughter, Emily, at the Platte Canyon High School shooting. So for those of you that have been around Colorado for a while, that was September 27, 2006 is when we lost Emily. And it was just a few days after that they started the foundation. And there was a commitment at that point, and the mission remains the same, by the way. It is, protect the joy of youth through education programs, through, collaboration with our law enforcement partners, school districts. So that remains our mission now. And we actually just revisited that mission statement recently in January with our board and leadership team, and it remains unchanged. And we do that work through educational programs. So that we just talked about that part, but we have the standard response protocol, which is based on 5 actions. That's used in over 60,000 schools now. So the 5 protocols are, it's hold in your classroom, secure, which is something that's happening outside of the school that we don't want it to come into the school. So something that's going on in the community. Lockdown, of course. Evacuate and shelter. So those are the 5 protocols. It's an all hazards approach to managing crisis in schools. And then our other program that we teach a lot is Standard Reunification Method. So SRP, Standard Response Protocol, SRM, Standard Reunification Method. And we do about 350 to 400 trainings a year. And as I mentioned, we're in over 60,000 schools is our estimate. When you go to our website, iloveyouguys.org, and I'll throw some of those plugs in here and there when you can. It's you can see on my shirt that it's spelled with the U, and I'll explain that about why in just a second here. But if you go to our website, you'll notice that all of our resources, and there's a lot of resources on that website, they're all at no cost. It's a frictionless download. We don't ask you for an email, no subscription, nothing. You just click download and take the materials. There's workbooks, there's classroom discussion guides. Well, I should say classroom instruction manuals, PowerPoints, keynote addresses, all kinds of things that you can take, posters, parent communication in multiple languages. So that's kind of what you'll find when you go to our website, all the resources that you need to implement the SRP and the SRM. And then the origin story with the name, I Love You Guys Foundation, is if you've seen our presentation or you've seen John Michael speak to this, when Emily was being held captive in that classroom, he asked if anyone at the time, he didn't know how to send a text. He's a tech guy, but he didn't know how to send a text. He asked if anyone there knew how to send a text, and there was a reporter from the Flume that was there. And so she sent Emily a text and just said, "Where are you?" And the response they got back was, "I love you guys." And it was sent to John Michael, received that text, and Ellen received a similar text as well. And so that's how that was spelled. And so that's in the name of the foundation. And Emily gave us a gift, and that is a voice in this space. And John Michael and Ellen have, they've really paid great honor and a tribute to Emily's voice. She knew she was going to change the world. I don't think she knew how at that moment when she had just turned 16 2 weeks prior. But she literally has changed the world. So, and her voice is what keeps us going.
That's an incredible story. Karen and I talk about this quite a bit. My kids are 8, 12, and 14. Kids are roughly in the same category of age. And this is what's the number one thing on every parent's mind still, is the safety of our kids at school. So thank you to you and the organization, the foundation, for what you do. How would you, maybe if we take a step back for a second, how would you kind of characterize the landscape today of school safety? It's amazing that you're working with 60,000 schools, that you provide these capabilities or this material for free. At kind of a macro level, how would you characterize, the state of play here?
Well, here's an interesting thing. I just saw a report that came out just in the last day or two. And I apologize for not being able to cite the source, but basically we've seen a drop. For last school year, we saw a drop of 22.5% in active shooter events in the country. So first off, I would say the work that we're doing is making a difference. And that's not just the foundation, that is the collective. That's all of us. We all have to work together and be in the same, basically kind of on the same pace and on the same step to be able to get this to work right. That is part of the secret sauce of the standard response protocol, is the collective impact and the force multipliers that it creates. So back to the question though, state of school safety right now, I would say that lots of engagement. So people they're taking the time, they're spending the money, they're training their staff, they are updating their facilities, they are working with their community partners to create a safe and secure learning environment, which is what we're all about. So, and I don't think that there's not a state in the union that we haven't been to, and that includes Alaska and Hawaii. We've been to Alaska and Hawaii just in the last few weeks. So everywhere, every state is working on this. I feel like every school district is working on it. Now, some are mandated. There's more and more state legislation that we're seeing that's requiring schools to have a crisis response plan, that we're requiring schools maybe to have a reunification plan. So if there is a need to reunify students with parents, you have a plan for that. So some of those, there's more of that as well. That's maybe what's driving some of this. But a lot of it too is just recognizing that the attitude that it'll never happen here, I really think is starting to go away. And I think people take this work very seriously and know that it can happen anywhere, it being an active assailant event. But the other thing though is all hazards approach. Holding your classroom just means that we're just going to keep kids in the classroom because there's something going on in the hallway. It could be a staff member having a medical event. You could have a dysregulated child in the hallway, that we need to address that situation. That happens every day across this country. And so we need to have plans on how to manage those types of crises. A secure is get everyone inside and lock the outside doors because there's something going on in the community that we don't want to come into the school. Bears, mountain lions in Colorado, those things happen here. And we need to get people in, lock the doors. But there's also other things. There can be criminal activity in the community. So those types of things happen everywhere and all the time. So school crisis and managing school crisis doesn't have to be just that active assailant situation. I'll call them routine school crisis because I worked in public ed for 23 years. And so I will say that we do have some crises in schools that feel a little bit more routine because we deal with them several times a year, maybe than others. So people are taking it seriously. People are committed to the work and they're doing the work. And so here's an interesting little data point for you. We have 7,700 downloads a week from our website. Now, again, we don't know who's necessarily downloading. We can see regions of the country where that's coming from, regions of the world. So this is across the world, by the way, too. So 7,700 downloads a week by about 3,500 individual people that are coming onto our website. So that tells us that there's a lot of traction. We're also in the Department of Defense Education, so activity. So those are schools that are on military bases across the world. So that puts us in 11 countries. Last year we trained in Dubai with Aga Khan. That's a nonprofit that helps provide education in schools across the country and or across the world in places that typically may not have education. So we're doing our part. We are doing a lot more work in the UK as well. So Martin's Law just passed in the UK in April. And so, yeah, we're 7,700 downloads a week tells us that there's a lot of interest, and those are people that are doing the work. So it's an exciting time to be involved in this type of work because we're making a difference.
Standard response protocol, standard reunification. Maybe just explain the basics of what these are, and then maybe a little bit like how did you decide to start here as a foundation, and how do you go about building something like this that standardizes basically a response that for what I call kind of a fairly fragmented universe of school districts and stuff. So kind of the journey of that, like a little bit about what it is and kind of the journey to get there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first couple of years, 2006 to 2008, John Michael and Ellen, and then Emily's twin brother Casey, they were kind of thinking about what is our response to this tragedy going to be, and they really started by asking questions and listening. And one of the questions they asked was, in your last crisis, what was the biggest challenge that you faced? And what they routinely heard was communication. And the second response was communication. And the third response was communication. So then they started looking into kind of, well, what guidance is out there? They found guidance from Department of Homeland Security, Department of Education, like they were looking at the federal level. And they were seeing that there's guidance out there, but the guidance wasn't real specific about what protocols should be used. And so faced with that information, they started looking at then more locally, like boots on the ground, who's doing what. And what they found was all kinds of terminology. I mean, I think even 6 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly in my district where I retired from, Adams 12, it was more like 2003, 4, when we were doing this work, where we had different codes. We would, lockdown level 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the district next to us might be code red, code blue, code thing. So what we found was there was discrepancy. There was not a common language being used. And we know through ICS that we need to be, and our law enforcement friends too, and fire friends, that common language and common terminology is a really big deal. And so that's where John Michael and Ellen said, we can make a difference. We can help with this. And so Karen and I both, being from the Denver area, that's how I got to know John Michael and Ellen, because Adams 12 5-star school is the district I was working in. We were using 4 terms at that time. We were using lockdown, lockout, evacuate, and shelter. Now we've changed lockout to secure because there was a little bit too much confusion. But it wasn't just me that created that terminology. I was working with John Michael's sister at the time. She was Sergeant Heidi Waltz at the time, then moved up the chain. And I think towards the end of her career, she became a deputy chief here in Colorado. But Sergeant Waltz and I were working on this along with Kent Davies, who was the emergency manager for Broomfield County in Colorado. And we came up with those terms after 18 months of kind of researching, talking with students, talking with parents, talking with teachers, talking with attorneys, talking with law enforcement. So we had lots and lots of collaboration, and those were the 4 terms we came up with. And John Michael and Ellen found a handful of other districts across the country that were using those same terms. And so that's kind of where we landed. And here's the trick. Here's the secret to this whole thing, though. Common terminology means and requires common understanding. So what the SRP really is, we used to say that there was a side effect of the standard response protocol, and that was it gets all of these people in the room together. Get your law enforcement, your fire, EMS, emergency management, all of these people are in school district. They all have to get into a room together to talk about, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to implement it. So that used to be the side effect. Now we just say that that's the effect. Because once you've started those conversations, more often than not, if you're going to have a really successful implementation of the SRP, then you're going to see those conversations are going to continue, because they realize, man, if we can create a safe learning environment, that spreads out into our community as well. So we can take some of the same things that we're doing and apply that in our communities as well. And it's not just the response protocol at that point. We're talking about, behavioral threat assessment. We're talking about reporting, like what's going on. Maybe something happened on the weekend with one of your students, and because you now have developed this relationship with your law enforcement agency, you can find out about that maybe Sunday night before the student ever walks through the door. So you're prepared to maybe have some mental health support for that student. So that's the effect that the SRP had. That was something that we didn't expect, but we hear from districts all the time and from communities. It's like, oh yeah, we have quarterly meetings now with all of our partners in our community, not just talk about SRP and what we're doing in our schools, but to talk about as a community, how are we supporting our students and our kids? That's like powerful stuff right there. And then reunification, that came about because, to be honest with you, that came from Adams 12 as well, the Standard Reunification Method. The first 4 or 5 of those that I did were just horrible. They were absolutely painful and they were chaotic, and we had to figure out a better way to do it. So we started working with some of our local law enforcement partners at the time. Thornton PD was involved, Thornton Police Department, they were involved with that work. Some emergency managers as well, lots of school district people. And we just started kind of tinkering with different concepts and ideas. And we found one that really worked, and it gave the parents some responsibility and made them a part of the reunification process. And that's that card. There's one right over here by my dog from the floor, but that card, that was the key for us. It's like we give our parents this reunification card that helps us identify the student, it helps us identify who they are. And that just came through trial and error. But man, that first reunification I did, I remember, I know the name of the school, I know the situation, and I know this. It was about 1,000 students, middle school, and it took us 4 hours to reunify. And it looked a lot like what we kind of jokingly call the Simba method, which is where you just bring a student out and you hold them over your head and you say, whose child is this? It was almost that bad. It was painful. So we knew we had to do it better. So that's how the Standard Reunification Method came about.
I appreciate the description and the reason. I was going to ask the question, like, why are both the protocol and the method important? And you went ahead and explained that. And I feel like parents don't understand a little bit that I always use my area as an example, 911 centric perspective. There's 20 different school districts that roll into our 911 center. And then, countless first responder organizations. So not having a common language to be able to have these conversations in the community probably would lead the community to not really being able to have effective dialogue about what to do when something unfortunate happens.
Yeah, I mean, there was situations that we found where schools were using different terminology for lockdown within the same district. So you might have a high school on the north end of your district that's using one term, and then a district, same district, different high school that's using a different terminology. Now, imagine if you're the first responder that's going to that school. That can be very confusing. Now you start to build that out when you talk about 20 schools. So now if you've got 20 schools and they're using 40 different terms or even 20 different terms, it's too confusing for our first responders. And we know that seconds matter in these situations. And so part of what we can do to save time and increase our response and how we do our response is to provide clear language. So if you are an agency that's adjacent to a school district, it's not even your jurisdiction, but you have a mutual aid agreement signed between those two jurisdictions. And so you're going to respond if there's a crisis. If you're all talking the same language, then it'll make your response more effective. And we know these things. I mean, this isn't us that's saying this. This is NIMS. We learned this lesson on September 11th. We've learned this lesson from the folks that invented Incident Command, which, California wildfires back in the 70s. That's where all this came from. And a lot of that work was common terminology. Let's have a common goal and what we're going to try to achieve as well. So yeah, it's all really important stuff. You said something really quick too. I want to point out SRP, so protocol versus method. Let's talk about that real quick. So the standard response protocol, we do ask, look, we want you to tightly adhere to the language and what the protocols are. But the standard reunification method, it's a method. So go and look at iloveyoguys.org. There's that plug again. Take what works for you, because my district, we have 5,000 staff members, so I could pull 100 people every year and train them to be a reunification team. But I know that there are the district I went to school in Oklahoma, we have probably had 100 staff members, maybe 200 tops. So they're not going to be able to do that. So they would need to take different parts of the standard reunification method that work for them and apply that. So just know that the SRM, there's a whole bunch of resources on there. I think we have 66 roles identified for people that can participate in reunification to be on your reunification team. You do not have to use it all. Take what works for you with the method. The protocol, we want you to follow it pretty tightly.
I appreciate that distinction. That's helpful. You have like 60,000 schools now. What have you learned along the way in terms of like what makes a successful implementation? So if I'm out there and I'm a school or a district or a community, I'm downloading your stuff, like what happens next to make this actually get adopted?
So it starts with building that collaborative team. So it's communication. But in this case, we're going to communicate with all the people that are our stakeholders. So, and what that drives is the collaboration. So you've got to let people know, don't operate in a silo. Make sure that you're telling your teachers need to know, your students, your first responders, your parents, all of those people need to know, like, this is the, yes, absolutely. We actually have a video on our at iloveyouguys.org that's a roll call video for dispatchers and also for law enforcement. So they're like 5-minute videos that you can show your dispatchers as well as your roll call officers in the morning. So yes, all of those people have to know what's going on and what you're doing. And again, that's part of that. That's the effect, right? Is getting all those people in a room to talk about it. So don't just send an email saying this is what we're going to follow. Get into a room and have multiple conversations on this is what we're going to follow. This is how we're going to train that. These are the resources that we're going to use. Maybe you can identify, maybe there's 3 or 4 different languages that you need to have your parent communication going out in. We have 20 different languages now on our website for parent communication. We have about that many, I think, for the school posters. So have all of those conversations with your community and make sure that they are aware. It's not a secret. What we're doing is not a secret. There might be some tactical things in there that you don't want to share with your community. That's cool. You don't need to tell them everything, but they certainly need to know that you have a plan. And that goes for reunification as well. You don't need to tell them where your reunification site's going to be, but they should know that you have a plan for reunification. So if there ever is a crisis, the power outage, the water main break, whatever that thing could be, it could be that criminal event in a school. We have a plan to get you and your student back together. It's going to take a little time, but it's also designed to make sure that we are accounting for every student and that there's a handoff and a custodial exchange between us and the parent. So get everyone in the room together, talk through it, talk about how you're going to train it, how you're going to teach your students, your staff, how you're going to do the drills. All of those things are part of this. You can't just print it out and put it in a notebook and put it on a shelf. You have to actively work it. Drills are a big one. Drills we don't need to, I'm not talking about exercises, I'm talking about drills. We are out there trying to create muscle memory and muscle habit. So you don't need to, introduce anything that's traumatic to students or staff when you're doing your drills. We're just going through the motions. We're testing equipment. We're making sure our intercom systems work. We're making sure that, involve your law enforcement for these as well and your dispatch center. Make sure that they know when you call and say, we're going to do a lockdown drill, do they know what to do? Do they know what the term lockdown means? Karen, you just mentioned that. So make sure that they're involved as well. So it is a community effort, and train, drill, communicate, repeat. So wash, rinse, repeat.
I'm curious who leads this effort. And I'm sure the answer depends, but like my mind goes to, is it from the school or the district? Is it from some community leader? Is it from public safety leadership? So like who tends to be the person who's pulling these folks together and kind of leading the charge here? My assumption is it's somebody at the school or the school district, but maybe that's the wrong assumption.
No, I think your assumption's, it's correct. But really what we found is that there's a committed person. So you have coalitions of the willing, and then you have coalitions of the committed. And what we find is that there's one person in a district who's committed. Now, it could be the SRO. It could be the chief of police. It could be the emergency manager. It could be someone from public health who just says, I found out about this. I went to a training. It was amazing and we need to do this. But you get one committed person and then they become that lightning rod that gets this going. And then once people realize and they go and look at the materials and they see that this isn't complicated. And it's not, there's not a lot of cost to it. It's printing, it's time. That's, you can do it basically with those minimal things. If you want training, that's great. I Love You Guys Foundation is here to help you with that. But otherwise, yeah, it's typically one person. It could be, if your school district is large enough that you have a director of security, then it might be that person, or it might be that person that's been told you are the director of security. I was training in Florida in the spring, and we had a gentleman his name was Stacy, he was from Alabama. He was the athletic director. He was a great guy in the room. I really enjoyed talking to Stacy. So Stacy, if you're watching this, shout out. But he was the athletic director for the district, but he was also in charge of school safety for the entire district. So, but he was at the training. He was like, we're going to get this done. We're committed. So you get that one person, and then you've got to figure out who to talk to, right? So make sure that you know who are the other people in your community that might be committed to this. Well, we know law enforcement, they have a commitment to keeping their community and their students safe. So that's probably the first call I would make if I was a school district just getting started. I would download materials from iloveyouguys.org. I would make a call to my law enforcement partners and say, this is what we want to do. Can I buy you a coffee? Or better yet, can I buy you lunch? But coffee will get the door. That'll open the door too.
That's right. I love the who are the people in your neighborhood. It made me go back to, what was it, Sesame Street a long time ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we don't do that enough these days.
Those are I'm going to steal that, Karen. I'm going to talk about that in my training side. Think about who are the people in your neighborhood that are the stakeholders and care. I mean, they all care. Your parents care deeply. The district people, your school district people care deeply. Law enforcement care deeply. But there's also some people, though, that have a responsibility. It's either by title or commission. They're commissioned officers, whatever that is. But there's people in your community that are more than just, yes, we want to do this. They're like, yes, we must do this. You want those, we must do those people or must do these people in your group.
So you've made tremendous progress over the years. What are some of the things that you've noticed where it's not happening? Like what's the reason that not every school is doing this and doing it well, or every community? Like maybe call it the hurdles to get the rest of the country to adopt this.
I think one of those hurdles is probably, where do I start? It seems like it's such a monumental task, even if it's just 3 or 4 schools in your district. Getting over that fear of where do I start, or maybe there's an existing system in your district that's different than the SRP or the SRM. So then it's having a conversation about like, okay, how do these things how do they intersect? And you can have, the SRP is not, we don't ever say that it can only be the standard response protocol or the standard reunification method. If you're using other things, if you have, avoid, deny, defend from our friends with alert, and you want to bring in SRP, because that's a very specific thing to a active assailant event, and you want to bring in an all hazards approach, those two protocols and those two programs can live together. It's not a if this, or that. It's not a this or that thing. It's a let's get it. So let's do this together. But I think it's sometimes can be overwhelming to think about where do you start, especially if you're brand new and you don't know the chief of police or you don't know the sheriff or who those people might be, and you got to cold call them. I mean, you're kind of cold calling people, saying, "This is who I am. This is what I want to do," or "This is who I am. Can we meet and talk about what you want to do? And I'll tell you what I want to do, and then we can start the collaboration and then the spark." So I think that's part of it. Sometimes, again, 23 years in public education, I think sometimes we can talk about funding, and funding can be a bit of I hate to say excuse, but because it's a reality. School districts across the country are underfunded and understaffed. I don't know any school district who would say we have enough staff to give every student every service that we want. Every school district will say that we're understaffed. And so you've got competing interest here. So, safety can never, and this isn't my quote, and I wish I could remember the gentleman's name who said this. I heard it back in March when I was in New Orleans. But this gentleman said, he goes, safety can never be an and. So when you're talking about funding things or prioritizing training, you can't ever say that, okay, we're going to do this and safety. Let's never make it an and. Safety should be always at the front of the conversation. I can assure you that your parents have an expectation that safety is your number one priority. Quality of education, absolutely, high priority. But if you can't provide a safe environment for the students and the staff, they're not going to show up. So we have to get this right.
I can imagine that, to your point of like cold calling, that might be a little intimidating to try to pick up the phone and figure out who to call in law enforcement or public safety. So I'm going to put Karen on the spot. Kind of, what's your advice like there? Can demystify the intimidation factor of that, and kind of maybe your thoughts on like the importance of it from a law enforcement perspective and a public safety 911 perspective, and how to maybe start those conversations.
I mean, I think it's critical to make sure that we understand how to best respond to an emergency at different facilities. And of course, we do that every day, whether there's a protocol or not, right? Law enforcement, 911 gets the call, they process that call, that request for service, and they dispatch the appropriate units and resources. They manage that event. We've got field responders that go out to the scene. And sometimes you just figure it out along the way. For schools that have school resource officers, typically it's going to be those folks that start to understand what's happening in the school. Are there protocols? Are there not protocols? And that is the link between your school district and the rest of your organization, your agency, to bring that information back and ensure that as a whole agency, each and every one of us in that emergency response chain are trained and educated and aware of what the protocol is for that district or that school. And, I can use an example because started in Colorado, and before I came over to RapidSOS, when I was still in the center, I remember our SRO coming into dispatch and providing us with these handouts to put in our training book that sat in the little spinny round thing. Dispatchers will remember these things. And, she kind of went over, what does it mean? How does it work? And I think even back then it was like, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll hear these words and people are going to do the action. It means something totally different now. One, as a technology provider who is doing work in this space and also providing critical intelligence to public safety. And on the other side of it is a parent who has kids in schools that are getting these activations frequently. And so I think for all of us in public safety to think of yourself as that community stakeholder first. My kids, my friends' kids, my nieces and nephews, somebody that has a child in school. It should matter to you. Phone a friend. Friends in this public safety space. Ask around, to go visit your schools. Ask them what they're doing, what they're using. So you have to be really curious. And I'll give a shout out to not only you, Pat, but also 27J, because we had a situation just last year where at my son's high school, we were getting a lot of incidents occurring. And so, they send out a hold or a secure, and parents get a text message. And then you start to look at this Facebook chain of people going, oh my God, the school just went on hold. What do we do? How do we get our kids out? And there's just like mass panic, and not having context or understanding and awareness of like, okay, well, what is school using? How is it working? I was an informed parent. So I kind of started looking at these threads and like, well, okay, people are anxious. They don't understand what these things mean. How do we make sure that communication goes out to parents? And so Pat introduced me to the folks at 27J and just sat down as a community member, a stakeholder, a parent in the community, and a technologist. How is there a way that I can help you communicate better? Or do I maybe have ideas and maybe I don't? But how are you communicating with parents? And you just have to be curious. I think a lot of us just as humans have lost curiosity, and we all own responsibility. So if I'm a parent, I'm responsible for my kids. I better know what's happening at their schools. So, take a little bit of ownership in that awareness piece too. Don't wait for somebody to spoon feed you.
What districts can do to help with that as well is communicate early and often. FEMA has crisis communication training that's free, and they have the rule called the 95-5 rule. And 95% of your crisis communication is done before the crisis ever occurs, and then the 5% is actually during the event. That 95% is building that trust, opening those communication channels. And so we tell people, it's like, that's why we provide you parent handouts. Use those things. Don't just do it once a year. October is school safety month. Maybe there's an opportunity to have a little bit of a campaign around what you're doing with school safety in October. Second semester, as kids are coming back in January from a nice long break, there's an opportunity to remind parents, by the way, this is our plan for reunification. This is our plan and how we manage crisis within our schools. So those are all important things. And it's not, again, it's also, don't just have one meeting with your law enforcement and emergency response folks, your first responders. That's an ongoing opportunity. Like, have those quarterly. Just go meet for a cup of coffee. It's a great opportunity to make sure that you're still aligned, but also, I loved going to get coffee with my law enforcement friends because they always had a good story. It's like, man, you guys live. I'm living a boring life in a school district, and they're living out, like, they lived life. And then same with, with the fire department folks around Adams 12 as well. It's like, you guys do some crazy stuff. It's worth it. Go buy them a cup of coffee. You'll be entertained, and you'll get some work done as well.
And follow them on your social media pages, because a lot of the fire departments are having events like a fire muster, things like that, where it's all about public education and community. Go and grab, hot dogs with your fire station. There's coffee with a cop. You've got other events that are happening with public safety. August, we've got National Night Out, where neighborhoods come together and your law enforcement partners are there as well. Have these conversations. And I also go kind of back to the responsibility piece of, how are you as a parent keeping this on the top of your mind for your kids? So another example, I get the printout from the school on orientation day of the standard protocol. They go through it and they train us, and then you stick it on a little thing in the laundry room and you can fix it and forget it, right? But when these incidents happen, your kids are usually texting you, what's going on at the school? I don't know what happened. We just went on secure or whatever. So we started drilling the kids last year on, okay, let's say, for example, your school goes on secure and you hear that in the building. What actions do you take in the school? Verifying that they really understand what's happening. When do you think that I should be concerned about an incident occurring at your school? Should I be concerned at hold? And for my daughter, who was in elementary a couple of years ago, she was like, probably not, because that's what this means. Okay, well, when do you think mom should start to get a little bit worried? And so we talked about, maybe around the lockdown piece is when we should start to get a little bit worried, so that it can also ease some of their anxieties when these things go off at school and they go into one of the protocols. How do we help them also ease their fears? Because it's a scary thing if you really don't know why your school is going on hold or why your school is going on secure. So again, it's that personal responsibility as a parent to help our kids feel safe, secure, aware, and that they understand what to do.
Karen, you are like the living example of what I want every parent to be. So we talk about this, or I talk about this in the training that I do. And that is really around, like, school districts. What are we doing when we're going to have a drill? Let's use this as an opportunity to practice, like using our communication channels, reminding parents, again, this is what we're drilling, this is why we do it. But in addition to that, maybe give some parents some talking points. So not every parent is going to be savvy or feel comfortable having a conversation with their student when they come home and they say, what'd you learn in school today? And the student says, oh, we had a lockdown drill. But if we've given the parents some talking points, now this becomes an extension of the school day. And it becomes not just a school lesson, but it's a life lesson. And Karen, that's what you were just talking about. It's like what the conversations that you're having with your own kids, that makes this a life lesson, not just a school lesson. And that is gold. So good job.
Well, I think fashion cop.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this comes, Karen, because, like, your sophistication of your background. I think most parents I know probably don't understand any of this. And I think if they stopped and thought about it, they'd be like, man, I really need to understand how this works, to your point. And so I don't know, Pat, if you see the same thing, or do you feel like parents are fairly well educated on this, or maybe they're the last group in the community to actually really understand how this works?
I think we have some parents that are really tuned in, and then we have parents that are kind of, it's just what you would expect with anything, right? Moderately tuned in, and some that just are not. But if we can provide them different types of media and different types of communication, so maybe they're not going to sit down and read something, but what if we send them a video? What if the district creates a quick video on, hey, here's an overview of what this is, and go and video that at one of your schools, so the parents have a connection to that. It's like, this is what this means. So you've got to find the right type of media that's going to relate to parents, and there's not just one. You're going to have to kind of use all of them. But again, I think letting parents know ahead of time that you're going to do a drill, and then giving them some talking points, so when their student does come home, that they're a little bit more prepared to have those conversations. I think that's a good place to start as well.
I would say one more piece. If your school district or your school is having a safety night where they're going to be briefing on all of these things, or kind of any of those events, show up. I attended one of these for my son's school, was the high school, and they had a virtual link, and I think there were less than 5 people online, and I was the only parent physically there. And this is a high school of hundreds of kids, and you have one parent. And I just think, like, parents, I know that our schedules get busy. I know that we can make all kinds of excuses about, how we're not showing up. It is our duty and our responsibility to show up for our kids. And that is like the first place to really understand, because what happens is you start playing the blame game. If something occurs at the school and you don't know how to respond, then we're blaming other people. How could we have partnered better and understood or understand what is happening?
Yeah, if your school district's not having not a school safety night and you want one, you'll be surprised if you ask them to host one. They probably are going to be very happy to say, we would love to talk about that, unless they're not doing anything. And then maybe that prompts them to say, yes, give us 2 months, because we're going to go out and implement the SRP real quick. We would host those events. We had that twice a year in District 12. We would have those parent safety nights. And Karen, same thing. We would have 100 people, 150 people show up for a district with over 33,000 students. But here's what put my mind at ease with that, and I could go home and sleep well that night after that event. Those 100 people are going to tell 5 to 10 of their friends what they've learned, and and then those 5 to 10 are going to maybe share it with a few as well, depending upon what they take away from it. But eventually, the word gets out to your community that the district's taking this seriously. The law enforcement agencies in my community are taking this seriously, because they're there as well. They have SROs in our buildings. They're doing all of the things that would indicate to us that they take this very seriously, and that's part of it. But you can't ever take your foot off the gas. So that's the one thing. It's just if you ever have that meeting where you've got 1-to-1, parent to student ratio, and you're like, man, we've nailed it. Don't stop. You've got to keep going.
Well, I think also, if you go back to the example of Facebook, like something happens and there's a lot of misunderstanding on social media. The point is, you're having these safety nights, you're educating some folks. They can start responding to the community when things are happening about like how to actually think about this. Otherwise, I'm sure things can get out of hand pretty quickly.
It's the 95-5 rule. 95% of that work is happening long before that crisis ever occurs.
Great point. I love that 95-5 rule. Pat, maybe to change direction slightly, obviously there's a lot more awareness around school safety. There's money coming into this space. You have technology coming into this space. How does that create a challenge in that you might be talking about maybe the purity of a process and trying to standardize on that, and then you have tech vendors not trying to create any harm, but they may have their own view of how to sell a proprietary method that kind of ties into their technology. Or maybe I have it incorrect, but I'm just kind of speculating that this might be somewhat of a challenge. Love your thoughts on that.
What we've found, and as my 9 to 5 or my daily job as Alliance Director, these are the people that I talk to. I talk to our commercial partners. Some of them are mission partners with us, some aren't. But what we find is that a lot of those folks, when they go to implement into a school or they're going to work with the school district asks them, do you align to or do you comply with the standard response protocol from the I Love You Guys Foundation? So they call us to get educated. So there's not many out there that I'm aware of that are offering something that is a deviation from the standard response protocol. In fact, many of our mission partners the reason that they're mission partners is they want to align tightly with the standard response protocol. They want to be able to use our logos and icons. So there's familiarity when you look at that poster that's on the wall of your classroom, and then you open up the app on your phone, they look the same. They talk and they're using the same language, lock lights out of sight, secure the building, get inside and lock the door. So they're seeing that there's commonality between those things. So I think it's more often than not. Now, it wasn't always like that, definitely. But in the last 5-6 years, we've definitely seen that kind of pivot now and become where the commercial partners are really aligning to that. And it's not just app and technology. It's, we have intercom systems like where people now, intercoms are so much more sophisticated than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there was literally this big gray box. I remember it in the school, and there was these manual switches, and that's how they would talk to the classrooms. But now it's so much more sophisticated. Two-way communication is much better. There's typically a visual component that goes along with that. So you can make sure that your students that have maybe impairments, audio impairments, are getting that language and getting that message as well. So, and that's another opportunity. So if we call for a protocol hold in your classroom, we want to see, the intercom's going to say hold. You might have strobes in your building that are going to flash purple. That's the same color that we use on our poster. And then if there's an LED display in your classroom, it's going to show the icon that says hold that we all know. So getting everyone to work together in that space is really, it's actually not very hard because people want to align and collaborate. And so the other parts of technology that we're really starting to see that I think is going to make a difference too, it's camera technology is getting really good, and AI's ability to not only look for objects, but to look at like how someone walks and to say that person's walking a little bit different today than they normally do, which kind of sounds big brothery a little bit, but it's all of those things. And so if we can see someone approaching our school, maybe that they have a weapon drawn already and they are 50 yards from our school, and we can identify that, and someone can put the school into a lockdown before that person ever gets to even that first barrier, which is a locked door. We know that locked doors work. So hopefully all of your exterior doors are locked in your schools at all times. But if we can be going into a lockdown and notifying first responders that we have someone approaching our school with a weapon, those seconds matter, and technology improves and that really buys us time. But then the number one thing, though, this is what we know. Sandy Hook Commission told us this. We've had other reports since that time. Is we've not had a loss of life once someone is behind a locked door. So once you're behind that locked door, there's not been a loss of life. Now, we think of Uvalde. That door wasn't locked. At Redstone at Red Lake, Minnesota. That the assailant there shot that lock, and that lock did not give up. That lock did not fail. That assailant then started shooting through a side light. But there's only been a couple of instances of a loss of life behind a locked door, and it was because there was a different, it wasn't the lock that failed. And then the other one that we know of was Emily. In the case of Emily, that assailant was already behind the door, and then that person locked it. So that assailant there locked the door. So, and then it took, I think it was 1,000 grains of, I'm not an explosive expert, but Jeffco SWAT team had to blow that door off the hinges to make entrance into that classroom. But that was, so we know that a locked door does a lot. It buys us time. We need time barriers because the people that are there to do good and respond to this crisis, they're coming. They're going to get there really quickly. We just need to get you behind a locked door, lock lights out of sight.
Great advice. So locked doors, you mentioned the camera technology and AI. Anything else while we're on this thread, like what other tips and tricks have you learned that you'd recommend?
So, there's a lot of states that are passing Alyssa's law, and that's a law that requires folks to have a wearable device that would notify not only the school, but also connect directly to your PSAP, your 911 center. Again, these are all things that decrease the time that we need to respond. So we're going to have rapid response. So that technology, anything that we can do to rapidly notify the school. And if you're not there yet, don't panic. This isn't a panic buy, but just know that rapid communication of whatever protocol you need to go into is the key thing in any of the planning that we're doing. So if you don't have, maybe you don't have the budget or you're not really prepared to implement something like that, do you have walkie-talkies? What's your radio culture? So you can do a lot from one end of the building to another with just school radios and let people know, but it's got to be rapid communication to that PSAP center. And I'm using PSAP. I should probably say 911 center, but I think everyone on this call probably knows what a PSAP center is. But it's rapid communication to your dispatchers that are going to then get law enforcement, fire, and your first responders on the move. So, and there's a lot of technology in the market right now that's helping with that. The wearable devices, that's what typically Alyssa's law requires, is someone to have this device that's on them. It's not much bigger than your school ID, probably. It's about the size of a driver's license, maybe a little bit bigger, and gives you the opportunity and an ability to touch a button and open up a channel of communication. Now, they all have different features. I would definitely tell people, go out and find the one that has the right features for you if you're looking, and implement that. But that's rapid communication equals rapid response. And then on our perimeters, if we can slow the person down from ever getting into the facility, we're doing some pretty good things.
Any of the either law enforcement agencies, fire, 911, public safety entities, if you just have questions and you want to reach out, let us help you connect with our partner network, as well as learning about how we can help get those signals in so much faster with a lot more context than just a location, which is the foundation of every emergency request for service. But, certainly there's a lot more data that can be received, leveraged, and understood, especially if somebody's not able to speak.
Trust but verify is what I would say too. So if you're talking to a vendor and they say, oh no, we can directly communicate with your 911 centers in your community, I would verify that with my whoever's running that dispatch center, whether it be the sheriff or local police department, whoever that's going to be. I would trust but verify that information with anyone that I was considering to bring into that space in my school district. Yeah.
And if you don't know who to call, just call Karen. She probably
Yes.
knows who to talk to in your community.
Let me just give her cell phone number out real quick.
Well, Pat, I really appreciate this. The foundation's done obviously incredible work. I'm curious, what next for the foundation? Obviously you have, you just said you reinforced the mission. I'm sure you talked about what are the goals as you move forward as an organization. What's the next opportunity challenge that you're going after?
So one thing we did change was our vision. So the vision was really around school safety, and now we've added the term community. I heard a gentleman just a few weeks ago, and Dr. Stephen, I apologize, I don't have your last name correct, but here's what he said about this. He said, we don't have a school safety problem. We have a community safety problem that sometimes gets into our schools. And so that was really impactful for me. So, and I think that, 5 months before I heard him say that, our board and leadership team talked about, we need to expand this is a community conversation, and it's community safety. We have a safe community that's going to help foster a safe learning environment, safe school environment. So we're very interested in how we start to expand not just the SRP and the SRM, but the concept of a safety continuum. There's lots of stuff here. There's lots of stuff that gets done. NFPA got this right. They did research, then they developed some regulations. They did design features. So, sprinklers in buildings, smoke detectors, all these things have contributed to, hundreds and thousands of lives being saved due to fires, things. We need to kind of be thinking about this the same way. So like, what is the research that we need to be doing to keep our schools safe, and how does that impact our community? So behavioral threat assessment is one of those things. The design of your facility is one of those things. All this collaboration that we're talking about needs to get bigger. So we are very interested in that, and we'll soon be, I think, talking more and more about that, and how the foundation, I Love You Guys Foundation, can help start to build those networks. It's something we're highly focused on right now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And maybe to ask a question on that to just trigger something. Do you have private enterprises reaching out too? Because I assume they have their own challenges. Like maybe the school is an entity where there's a lot of people. Bad things can happen. You can see this in other large facilities as well. Do they have their own processes, or do you find them reaching out to you as well?
They reach out. So we are, one of the things that we have them on our website now. You'll find programs you'll see something called Muni, that's municipality. There's one called Biz. There's one called HED, higher education. So we're actually kind of retuning and retooling some of those programs now. Houses of worship is a big one for us. That is one of those, literally walking through an airport story, and I had my shirt on because I had just left a training event and was going to get on a flight, Karen, to get back to Denver. And someone at the airport said, "Hey, we use your programs in my church." And so like those were those in the wild kind of, we call those in the wild sightings or encounters that we have. So it's an all hazards approach to an institutional response. So, I mean, it works in other things. We know that you can custom tune it a little bit to a specific environment. Reunification at a college is something different. Those are students they're all 18 or over, so they're adults. We don't need to reunify them with their parents. Now, we might need to reunify them with their stuff at some point, which is another process. That's another part of accountability. But so there's definitely, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because the first place my mind went to was our private schools and our charter schools as well. When you are talking about building up this community and this collaboration, this network that you're going to build to make this work right, please include your private schools and your charter schools. Every one of those institutions sits on land or in a community or somewhere that is served by public education. So public education, I think sometimes it's our responsibility to make sure that we're inviting those schools to our conversation as well, because in a crisis, we're all going to have to help each other. Police and fire get that. Law enforcement and fire get that. They have mutual aid agreements all over the place. School districts, private schools, charter schools, we need to get there. My former superintendent, Chris Godowski, still at Adams 12, I thought he summed this up the best I ever heard it. Doesn't matter if they're a charter school or private school, those are our kids. Those are the kids that live in our community. Those are our kids and our students. So we're going to take care of them. And I think that's a great, if you approach the work with that sensibility and that mission, you'll expand this whole thing and it becomes a community. That's when it becomes that community safety conversation.
It's amazing. I love how you think through all this. It has to be immensely rewarding to be walking through an airport and people just walk up to you and say, "Hey, I use your procedures, your methods and stuff." That has to be tremendously rewarding.
It's pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. I'm also on some of the videos, and sometimes I have people tell me I was at NASRO, the National Association of School Resource Officers, big conference last week in Texas, 2,900 school resource officers there. And I had a couple of people stop and say, "Hey, I show your video to my students." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I always tell them, we're working on new videos without this. You don't have to see this. You can. So, yes, I do apologize for people who frequently or routinely watch the videos that I'm in. So we're trying to find, handsome actors with like a nice head of hair like yourself. Maybe we'll contact you to do some of our videos. Karen, you too, both of you. You would be great additions.
We on a side note, we call Karen one take Karen because every time she does a video or any type of event, she just takes her one take and she's done. She just nails it every time.
I love it.
So
I do not have that skill set. Good job, Karen.
Well, I don't know. I can read the teleprompter. I feel like I learned that in dispatch reading cat notes. So I told them one day. But no, and shout out to all the school resource officers too. Man, what a critical role that they play, in our community and in our schools, supporting our kiddos each and every day. So hats off to y'all, SROs.
Yeah, you are much more than just a law enforcement officer in that school. You are mentors, you're coaches. You might be the only trusted adult in that school that a student feels comfortable talking to about something that's maybe going on at home that doesn't have anything to do with their education day. So you do so much more than just, you're not a ticket writer. That's not what you do. And anyone who's ever spent any time with our SROs knows that. Walk through, if you have any doubt about the validity, not that I want to get on this topic because it can be a touchy one, but if you want to see what an SRO does, go walk through the hallways of a school, a middle school, high school, wherever you have SROs. Go walk through that high school with an SRO, spend an hour with them and see how they interact with kids. It is magical. Yeah, they do a lot.
They always turn out to be like the football coach or the basketball coach. And, they're there for so long. And the kids, I remember, even our SRO back in the day and our DARE officer, many years later, because he was still at the police department. Then I go into dispatch, and then we had an opportunity to work together on actually one of the worst cases that our organization had. And I was like, "Hey, I remember you were my DARE officer." So they become your lifelong heroes, so to speak. So they really play a critical role.
Well, Pat, I really appreciate this. I think hopefully it's obvious for people listening to this where to reach out and learn more, but maybe let you go. We'll let you have a final word on this, and for those who may be still unclear, what's the best way to get a hold of your foundation? And either download the materials, get some training, or maybe even contribute to it.
iloveyoguys.org, and you'll find across the bottom of the screen, you'll see things that say standard response protocol, standard reunification method. Click on those bars, and that's going to take you into, that's where you'll find all those resources. So poke around our website. And if it works for you, take it. No cost, no email, nothing. Just take it and implement it. And if you hit a snag in your implementation, or maybe you have some questions, or maybe something's not quite clear, drop us an email. There's a general email box in there. Drop us an email. We'll respond to you. This is a really busy time for us, June, July, and August. So it might take us a couple of days to get back because we're in airports a lot, but we will get back to you. I can assure you that we'll get back to you and answer your questions. And sometimes it's an email directly from me, or a phone call from me, or it might be Kevin Bird, our training coordinator, training director, or Stacy Avila, who's our training coordinator, who also was the hostage negotiator at Platte Canyon. So we're all deeply connected and passionate about this work. So we're going to get back to you. And yeah, iloveyoguys.org. Go there and then hit us up if you have questions.
Well, Pat, thank you for the time. This has been immensely enlightening. And as a parent and, on behalf of my community, thank you for everything that you do and the foundation does.
Yeah, happy that we can make a difference.
Thanks. And thanks, Karen. Good seeing you.
You too. Till the next time, right?
Till the next time.